Hello, hello, hello. Art developer here. How is everyone doing? So, before I jump into this video, I want to make sure that I have at least one person on the live. So, if you are with me, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, give me a shout out. I'll shout out back to you, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, I think I have a few people. Wonderful. Thank you. Mercy, how are you, dear? Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, okay? So today we are covering FlexBox. I've had a number of you reach out to me just asking for clarification. And I think FlexBox is one of those things that when you see it in action or when you see it visually, because there's a lot of, one thing I like about the internet is there's a lot of information on the internet. But sometimes, especially when that information is written, so there's videos on Flexbox, right? But a few of you have reached out to say, I'm not really getting it. Emeka, how are you, dear? Ada, how are you? So I decided to make this video, but it's not me sort of teaching my way. I'm actually going to use a resource which I use a lot when I need to remind myself how to use Flexbox. So we're going to go off of that resource, and the URL to that resource is in the description. Okay. So we're going to go off of that resource, and then I'm going to demonstrate what the resource is teaching. Okay. So that's how we're going to do it today. Hopefully this session will not be too long. All right. So let's get into it. Okay. So this is the resource that we are using. I love this website. When it comes to CSS, I really love this website because it's really well done. I mean, kudos to the people behind this. It's great. It's very, in my opinion, it's laid out well. The explanations are good. So this is what we're going to use, and I'm going to demo it in the code. All right. So I'm not going to read through everything. Definitely see all the chapters they have. I'm not going to go through everything. I just want to highlight this part right here, which is where they introduce us to the terminology and the basic idea of Flexbox. Okay. So if you look at this diagram here, and let me see if I can make it bigger. Okay. So you look at this diagram right here, it shows us a number of things. We have our flex container, and we're going to see what that actually means when we go into the code. Gift, how are you there? I see you. So we have our flex container right here, and the flex container contains the items in it, the flex items, okay? So we have two flex items here in one flex container, okay? And the two things that I think is important to note is on the flex container, we have two axes. I don't know if you remember in math where they show x-axis horizontal and y-axis vertical, right? If you remember from math. So flex containers have two axes. They have the main axis and they have the cross axis. Okay. Now, this is important because the flex items will be arranged either according to the main axis or the cross axis. Okay. They're going to be arranged, and we'll see that in action when we get into the code. All right. Now, along the main axis, you have the main start, that is the starting position on the main axis, and you have the main end, which is the ending along the main axis. Okay. So like, for example, when we get into the code, you will see how sometimes we will pass in a property of start. That start means let the flex items be toward the start of the main axis or end. And we have the same thing for the cross axis. We have the cross start, which is from the top, and we have the cross end, which is from the bottom. Okay. All right. So I wanted to point that out. Let me return to normal size. So that's the part that I wanted to, and they make the explanation here is really good, but I wanted to point that out before we now go into the properties themselves. Okay, so they have pretty cool diagrams. There are two parts we're going to cover. We're going to cover properties for the parent and properties for the children. All right. So when we're talking about the parents, if you understand in coding, the parent is, like, for example, if you have a div, and then within that div, you have a number of paragraphs, p tags. So the parent of the p tags is that div. Okay. So parent in code is whichever code is containing other code. Aha. So in FlexBox, you have the idea of the parent or the container, okay, and then the children or the items, okay, in FlexBox. You have the parent, which is the container, the Flex container, and then you have the children, which is the elements inside the parent element. Those are the children or the Flex items. Okay. So in FlexBox, you can either configure the parent or you can configure the individual items in the container. Okay. I'm going to use container and items from now on. Okay. So you can configure either the container or you can configure the items. All right. Now, in FlexBox, in order to turn an element into a Flex container, all right, to turn an element into a Flex container, you have to give it the property display flex. Okay, that's the beginning of everything. You're not dealing in FlexBox until you have added that property display flex. So let's go over to the code and see what it looks like. Okay, I'm making sure that my head, I know where my head is. So if at any point my head is blocking what I'm talking about, please just tell me. Okay, although I have it here, but just let me know in the chat. All right, so let's go over to the code and see this in action. All right, so let me walk us through what is happening here. We have our HTML, and in this HTML, I have created a div, and this div has a number of divs in it as well, up to 9 of them. Okay, and each of these 9 divs has a number: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and this is their parent here, which is a div in itself. So visually, you can see it here. My container, okay, I gave it a class container, a CSS class. My container is this black rectangle right here. Okay, and the items are each of these squares that I have given a different number and a different color. Okay, each of these squares right here. Okay, so we have our container and we have our items. Now you can see they are arranged stacked on top of each other because we have not turned this container into a Flex container. All right, so naturally, by default, this is how the squares that I coded here, this is how they are going to appear. They are stacked on top of each other. If you in HTML, elements usually have, as by default, they have the block property, display block. And what display block does is, even though the element itself is not as big as the space available to it, block takes up the entire line for that element. Okay, that's what block does. It takes up. So even though this square is only, let me see, it's only 50 by 50. Even though this square is 50 by 50, because it has a default display block, the code will not allow any other element to be beside it. It's taking up that whole space for itself. Same thing with the second one, is taking up. I'm not going to go into that. I have another video where I explain that. If you check my channel, you can see a better explanation of what I just shared. All right. But I'm just trying to explain why it's stacked like this. That is default behavior in HTML. Okay. Now we are going to transform our container into a Flex container. So if we go to our code here, we see that we have the class container and cont1. That cont1 just means container 1. Okay, so I have that defined up here. So I'm going to make that container 1, I'm going to make it a Flex container. And I do that by adding display flex. What just happened? What just happened? You see, when I added display flex, Now our boxes are no longer stacked. Okay? They are no longer stacked. Now they are side by side. That's what Flex does. Flex changes the display block almost, don't quote me on this, I have to check, but I think that's what's happening. It changes it from display block, which takes the entire space on that row, it changes it to display inline. And with inline, elements are allowed to be side by side. Okay? So that is what display flex does, right? So let me comment it out. So you see, we go back to our default. This is default, but by making it a flex container, the elements are now side by side. All right. So let's go back to our guide. Okay. So coming back to our guide, we've done this part. All right. That's why I said this is going to be visual. Okay. The information is here. It's there on the internet. But I say, let me do it visually because some of us are visual learners. Okay. All right. So we've done that part. Now we come down to where it's talking about flex direction. Okay. So the flex direction property establishes the main axis. Which axis is going to be the main one? Okay. Now, if you remember up here, we talked about axis. Okay. By default, the main axis is left to right. But by setting flex direction, you can change which axis is considered the main one. Either the default main one or the cross axis now becomes the main axis. Okay. So let's go and see what that looks like. All right. So to do that, they've given us the code here. It says flex direction and you can set it. I think the default is row. Row is left to right. Okay. So you can set it as row. You can set it as row reverse. We'll see what that looks like. Or if you want the cross axis to be the main axis, then you set it to column and you can also have column reverse. Okay, so let's go and see that in action. All right. So this is our flex container. And right now, by default, our main axis is left to right. And the order is, normal order. So let me now change that order. So I add the property flex direction and I'm going to give it row reverse. Okay, you see what happened? I cannot make it. Okay, hold on. Let me fix that. Where is my container? Okay, I gave it a margin of 4. 4, 4, 4. Just 1 second. 4, 4, 4. Let's see what 8 looks like. Okay, let's see what 9 looks like. We just had it. I just want to show you because the overflow was overflowing the page basically. So I wanted to show you. So you see how I added flex direction row reverse. So it is still horizontal. It is still, along the main axis, but now the direction is reverse. So we are now going from 1 at the end through to 9. Okay. When we had it the other way, it was 1 on the left through to 9 on the right. But by changing the flex direction to row reverse, it's now reversing it. Okay? All right. Now, let's now look at flex direction column. Okay? So flex direction column sets it pretty much the way it was default. It sets the main axis from top to bottom instead of left to right. Okay. So that's why we see it now. Now you can see there's something is happening. I'm not going to get into this in this video. I just want to follow my outline. But you can see the size of the boxes is different because something else is acting. I'm not going to get into that now. I just want to demonstrate the flex direction row versus column. And if I say column reverse, you see how it's going. Now it's vertical, but it's going in the opposite direction. Okay, so that's flex direction. All right. Sometimes you need this. In my practice, in my job so far, I've not really seen a lot of use of flex direction in FlexBox, but it's there. Sometimes you do need it. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and take that out, and we go back to our. Let me make the margin what it was before. Okay. So this is our default. Okay, so that was flex direction. Okay, and as you can see, this left side of the guide is focusing just on the container. These are properties that we are applying to the container of the items, not the individual items themselves. We'll get to that later. Okay, now the next property that they cover is flex wrap. Judith, how are you, dear? Comfort, I see you. Solange, welcome. So we see flex wrap. Okay, this is another container property, and what it does is they said it here. They said by default, flex items will all try to fit onto one line. You can change that and allow the items to wrap as needed with this property. Okay, I love this guide. If you just slow down and read it, it's very good. But I understand some of us, we are visual learners. Okay. So over here, you see, we're still acting on container. Okay. We now add the flex wrap property and we have different options. No wrap, which is default. Okay. Default is no wrap, but we can change it to wrap or wrap reverse. So let's go to the code. Okay. So this is our this is our container. So we are still here. So let's add now the flex wrap property and we're going to give it wrap. See what happened? We no longer have the boxes that were hanging. God's time, how are you? I see you. You're not late. Just join in, jump in. So you see, we no longer have the hanging 789. It has wrapped because this container is now, that flex wrap has said, okay, you have to fit into this container. So whatever was hanging outside the container has now wrapped into it. That's what flex wrap does. It's one of my favorite FlexBox properties. So that's what flex wrap does. It wraps it into the container. If we had more boxes than this and it got to the end again, it will wrap the remainder again under. All right. So let's see it without, you see, and with. All right. Without the flex wrap and now with the flex wrap. All right. Now we do have another property, which is a wrap reverse. So just like our flex direction, wrap reverse, reverses the wrap, the wrap order. Okay. So instead of from the top left down to the bottom right, it's now going from the bottom left up to the top right. Okay. So instead of top left down, it's now going from bottom left up. Okay. Okay. All right. So that is flex wrap. Okay. All right. So Promise, how are you there? All right. So that is flex wrap. All right. So just going down, like I said, I'm just going down this guide. This guide is a great one, but I just wanted to show visually. All right. So this is now flex flow is now a shorthand. So we have seen flex direction and we have seen flex wrap. Okay. But so flex flow is like a combination of the two. So instead of defining flex direction and then flex wrap, you can define them together. Okay. So let's see that. So remember we had flex direction. So let me say flex direction row reverse. Okay. So flex direction row reverse was from the right to the left, right? Okay. And then let me define flex wrap. Let me define it as just wrap. Okay. So row reverse is taking us from the right to the left, but we are still wrapping normally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So if I wanted to do those two things together, okay, I would then say flex flow. You first define the flex direction, which is row reverse, and then space, you now define the flex wrap, which is wrap. And it gives me the same thing. Okay. So it's like a consolidated way of defining those two properties is what that is. Okay? All right. So let's move along. As you know, it's my custom. If you have a question, just ask it in the chat. When I see the question, I will address your question. Okay? All right. Now, let's go on to justify content. This is another one of my favorite FlexBox properties to play with. Okay? Now, you can see there are many examples. All right? Justify content. Justify content, as you see down here, it defines the alignment along the main axis. Okay? It helps to distribute extra free space left over. Okay, so you can keep reading. All right? Yes, God's time. This video is recorded. It will be on my YouTube channel after I'm done. Okay? All right. So let's look at justify content. Like I said, it's one of my favorite properties to play with. Okay, so for justify content, we are going to move away from container 1. We're going to move on to container 2. So let me comment out container 1, and we are going to comment in container 2. Okay, so that's our container 2, and we're going to move down here. Okay, so our container 2 has 3 items, and I've already made it a flex container by adding display flex. So let's see what justify content is all about. Now, by default, justify content is flex start. Okay, you can see the container in purple and the items in orange. They look just like our own code. So by default, the justify content value is flex start. Okay, so let's look at these other ones: flex end, center, space between, space around, and space evenly. Let's look at what it looks like. All right. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is justify content, and we're going to make it, let me give a little bit more space here to the CSS. So we're going to make it flex end. You see what happened? Our boxes that were now, which axis is the axis we are dealing with? Which axis? Is it the main axis or the cross axis? Answer in the chat. What is our current axis? Is it main or is it cross? Is it main or is it cross? I'm waiting for some answers in the chat. Just watching this justify content, as I turn it off and I turn it on, which axis are we acting against? The main axis. Thank you, Ada. Yes. Okay. How do we know that? Because you see, as I am applying flex end, the boxes are moving horizontally. They are moving horizontally. That's how we know we are acting against the main axis. Okay? If they were moving vertically, then it would be the cross axis. Okay? All right. So that is what flex end does. Okay? Without it, all the boxes are towards the left. But when we say flex end, it moves the boxes together towards the right. Okay? Towards the end of the axis. Flex end, the end of the main axis. Okay? All right. Let's look at the next one. Now we have center, and you can guess what that is. Justify content center will move all the boxes to the center of the main axis. Okay? To the center. So you can see 1, 2, 3, they are in the center. All right? Good. Let's look at the next one, space between. All right, so space between, let's look at it. Space between, what it does is it calculates the space along the main axis and it divides it equally between. So it will leave box 1 at the start. It will push the last box all the way to the end. And then whatever space is remaining between 1 and 3, it will divide it equally and put 2 right in the middle. All right. Okay, let me add another box so you can see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to remove that space between. I'm going to add a fourth box, and I'm going to give it box olive. No, we already have olive. Let me give it red. Okay, and we're going to make it 4. Okay, so now we have 4 boxes in our container, our flex container. Okay, so let's now reapply space between. You see, it left 1 at the start. It dragged 4 to the end. And then that remaining space in between 1 and 4, it divided it equally around 2 and 3. So that white space in between the boxes, they are all equal size. These white spaces here. Okay? They are all equal size. And then 2 and 3 are now distributed equally between 1 and 4. Okay? I'm taking time to explain because when we go to the other space around and space evenly, you see the difference. Okay? All right. So let's take away our number 4. Okay? So now let's go to space around. Okay? So that is space. We've done space between. Now let's look at space around. Okay? You see now space around is different. Box 1 is not at the end, at the beginning rather. Box 3 is not at the end. There's actually space around 1 and 3, and there's space around 2, okay? So it has space around does not keep the first and last items, at the start and the end. It creates space around all of them. Now, if you measure this, you will see that I'm right. If you look at the white spaces in between the boxes, you will see that this space on the left side of box 1 appears to be half the space between box 1 and 2. Same with the space on the right of box 3. So this is like 1 space, 2 space, 2 space, 1 space. Okay, don't quote me on it. That's what I think. All right. So that is how space around works. Okay. Now let's look at space evenly. Okay. So space evenly, when we apply that, again, there is space around all the boxes, but you can see it's more. The space to the left of box 1 seems to be more than when it was spaced around. So justified content is just a way of arranging your items along the main axis in a way that suits you. Do you want it to be, between, that is, the 2 items are, the first and the last item are at the beginning and end? There are so many ways that you can configure. That's the power of FlexBox. Just with these simple properties, you can change the layout of whatever you're building. Okay? Like I said, this is another one of my favorite properties in FlexBox. Okay? All right. We're already at the halfway mark, so let me keep going. Okay? So that is justify content. We just covered all these options that you can see. All right? So you can read through at your own time and practice at your own time as well. Okay, let's keep going. Now we have align items. Okay, so this is another, let me make sure you can see. Okay, so this is another property, align items. Okay, now just like justify content worked along the main axis, align items works along the cross axis. Okay, so they said it here. They said this defines the default behavior for how flex items are laid out or arranged along the cross axis. Think of it as the justify content version for the cross axis, okay? So what justify content is to the main axis, align items is to the cross axis. Okay, Ada asks, in space around property, is there a way to set the margin that you want? That's a good question. I won't be surprised if there is. I don't know of it off the top of my head, and it is not in this guide that we are following today, but that is something you can definitely research. A way you could force it, let's see. A way you could force it is if I wanted there to be a particular space to the left of box 1, let me see if I can do that. So I've removed justify content. If I go to box 1, let me define it here. If I say box 1, and I give it a margin left of, let's say, 30 pixels. Okay. Oh, no, not box 1. Sorry. Container 2. I need to target it. I got it wrong. Container 2. I always forget how to do the child, like the nth child, first child. Let me just give it a class. Box 1. Okay. So I've given it a class so I can target it. So container 2, box 1. Aha. Okay. So I've given my box 1 a margin left of 30 pixels. Okay. So let's go now and justify content space around, which was Ada's question. Okay. So I'm going to apply it. Aha. So you see how the space around has acted, but it did not remove the margin of 30 pixels that I gave box 1. So box 1 has more space than it would if I didn't add this additional margin. So that's a way that you can manipulate it if you needed more space, if you needed to add more space or something like that. But as far as manipulating the space that the space around actually gives, it's possible that there's a way to do it. I'm just not sure. Okay. All right. So let us continue. Let's take that away and let's comment that out. Okay. So we were talking about align items. So align items is now along the cross axis. It's almost doing what justify content does, but along the cross axis. Okay. So we can see flex start, which is default. Okay. So the flex start property, the value is default, but then we have flex end, we have center, we have stretch, and we have baseline. Okay. So let's look at what that looks like. So for that, we are going to use our container 3. So let us, let's take this out. And let us comment this container out, and let's bring this container in. Okay, so this is our container 3, and this is the CSS we are working with here. So for align items, so I've given it a height because I want you to see the motion of the boxes when we apply the align items property. Okay, so by default, okay, the default value for align items is flex start. You see, when I added flex start, nothing happened, okay, because that is default, right? So even without defining it, this is the default value for align items. So if we change that now to flex end, okay, and we apply it, you see what happened? The boxes moved to the end of the cross axis, not the main axis, the cross axis. Okay, so cross axis is top to bottom. Okay, so it moved it from the start of the cross axis to the end of the cross axis. Okay, I take it away, it's at the start. I apply it, it's at the end. Okay, awesome. So that is flex end. All right, so we now look at center. Okay, so let's look at center. Okay. Okay, so align item center, when we apply it, is at the center. Okay, it's at the center. right? So you begin to see the power of FlexBox just with these properties, being able to arrange your elements. If maybe you've not noticed, but even in the box item itself, the box is a flex container, and I'll show you at the end, okay? To center that number in the center, as you see, I used FlexBox, all right? Okay, so this is align item center. Let's look at now align item stretch. Now, this is an interesting one, okay? This is an interesting one because you will see it's not going to work, and then I'll change something that it will work, okay? So align item stretch. When we apply it, nothing happened. Why didn't anything happen? Okay. The reason why nothing happened is because I have defined the height of these boxes. Okay. I have defined the height of these boxes. If we go down to the box definition, the box CSS, you can see that each box has a width of 50 pixels and has a height of 50 pixels. I have defined the height as 50. So what stretch does is stretch allows an item to take up the entire space along the cross axis if you have not defined it. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Instead of height, if I make this minimum height, then it works. Okay, then the stretch works. Let's take it out. Ah, okay. I've encountered a bug. Okay. Let's see. Stretch. Okay. Stretch to fill the container. Still respect min width and max width. Okay. So maybe it's not min width I need. Maybe it's max width. Okay. And max height, sorry, in this. This is interesting. Okay. I've uncovered something that doesn't quite work as I expect it to work. That's the max height. Okay. What if I say minimum height is 100, but it's taking the entire... I am not sure why that is happening. Okay. I will have to go and research, and I'll come back and maybe update this video with something, okay? One thing with me, as you know, people who have been following me, I don't practice ahead of time. I set up my code, but I don't practice because I like when we see our mistakes, or we see our confusion. If we don't understand something, you see it. That is the reality of being a developer, okay? That's the reality. So I don't set myself up to look. Okay, we have some questions. Is there a way I can move the flex end to the right path? Okay, let me return myself to... Okay, all right. I have a question. And we're still with container 3. Okay. Emeka is asking that if we have some items flex end, can we move it to the right? Okay. So how have we seen that you can move items to the right? Okay. That is justify content flex end. Okay. So this is what he's asking. Okay. Let's assume we have flex end. All right. So our align items is flex end. What Emeka is asking is, can we have these boxes? Yes, they are at the flex end of the cross axis, but can we have them over to the right? Well, how would we move these boxes to the right? Well, to move them to the right, we are acting along the main axis, right? And so how do we move items along the main axis? We use justify content, okay? So justify content, and we define it as flex end. Okay, so you see what happened. Okay, without it, yes, our items are flex end of the cross axis, but if we also want them to be flex end on the main axis, then we add justify content, which is our main axis property, and then we move it also to the end. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. I know I'm covering a lot. This is something that you practice with it. You can watch this video, at your leisure and practice with it. Okay. All right. So that's align items. The stretch did not happen as I thought it would. So let me look that up and I will come back and update. Okay. All right. So that is align items. Oh, yes. Baseline. I'm not going to go into baseline because it needed a lot more setup than I had time to set up. But the idea of baseline is basically if your items have text in them, if your items have text within them, the baseline value for align items will align the items so that the text in the items will be on one line. That's what it means. Okay? The text, can I do it? Let me see if I can. Come on, Arit. Come on, Arit. Let's do it. Okay, so let me try. So we have one. I don't know if I can do this. It just required a lot of setup that I did not have time. Okay. All right. So I've added some more numbers to box one. So let me now say align items baseline. And let's see if it works. Aha. Okay. It did. Very subtle change, but it did work. Let's do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. All right. So I've added more text basically to my boxes, right? But I want the elements aligned so that the first line of text in each box are all on the same line. Okay. So when I apply align items baseline, so you see what happened? It has shifted the boxes along the cross axis. Remember, along the cross axis, it has shifted them so that the first sentence of each box is on the same line. Okay? It's a subtle change, but you can see it in action. Okay, I'm happy I did it because when I was setting this up, I was like, I don't know if I have time, but I'm happy yes. So you can see how baseline works. Okay? So baseline is for, okay, I need these elements, the text within them or whatever content is within them, I need them to all start on the same, like I need them all to be in one line, okay? Because without baseline, you see that the first line of box one is slightly above the first line of box two, and the first line of box three is slightly above even, you see they are all on different levels. So baseline brings the first line of text all to the same level, okay? And that's what they demonstrated here, okay? All right, we have about 15 minutes left. Okay, let's move on to align content. Okay, so align content, it says this aligns a flex container's lines within when there is extra space in the cross axis. Okay, so with you might ask the question like, what is the difference between align items and align content? I believe that align content works on a group. It works on a group of items. Like you can see with align items, it's just one line, one row of items. But with align content, we have multiple rows. Okay. So let's see. Okay. We're going back to our container one. Okay. So let us just 1 second. Okay, so let us comment out our container 3 and let's bring back our container 1. Okay, this is our container 1, and let's get rid of this. Okay, so this is our container 1, and I'm going to add a flex wrap, and I'm going to wrap it. And then I am going to make my container 1 taller. Okay, so let's make it taller. Okay, 300, I think is okay. All right. And we have our flex wrap. Okay. So now let us apply align content. Okay. And see what happens. This is one that I'm not too familiar with. Align content flex start. Okay. All right. Now you see what happened. Without align content, let's go through all the align content and then I'll talk to you about what the default is. So align content, you see without it, our wrap is still happening, but there's this space. It's like it's spacing out the wrapped part, okay? The group of boxes. With align content, it pushes everything to the start, again, along the cross axis, okay? Pushes everything to the start, okay? We have align content flex end, okay? So if I say flex end, you can imagine what it's going to do. It's going to push the group now down to the bottom, okay? Down to the end of the cross axis, okay? We have a center, okay? As you can expect, it has taken that group now of boxes and put it now in the center of the cross axis, okay? Those are the most common ones. Let's see about stretch. I don't know if this stretch because it failed me the last time. So let me see if it will work. Okay, so I have to look into this stretch because I'm sure there's something in the rest of my CSS that is overriding the stretch setting. So like I said, I'll research it and I will update the video. Okay, all right, let's look at space between and space around. Okay, so space between. Okay, so space between, just like along the justify content. Remember, justify content space between, it took, it took the first one, kept it on the left, the second one kept it on the right, and then if I added more boxes, let's see. They're all going to be black, forgive me, because I'm doing this on the fly. But if I added more boxes, see what happened? Okay, I've added more boxes, but the space between is what it's doing is it's taking the first set. It's no longer just acting on one item. It's taking the first group that fits in the width of the container, keeping it at the top. Then it's taking the last group of boxes at the end of the flex wrap, keeping them at the bottom, and then sticking the in-between boxes right in the center. And that is what we saw in justify content, only it was along the horizontal axis, not the vertical. It was along main, not cross. Okay. So it's almost like two side, justify content is opposite to align content. You see? Okay. So we have space between, and then we have a space around, which we've seen with justify content as well. If I say space around, then you see it's almost like the same arrangement, but now it has allowed for space before the first set and after the last set. Okay. All right. I'm gonna keep moving because I need to cover. We've gotten to the end of I believe the container. Okay. I'm not going to go through gap. Okay. I think somebody asked about controlling the space between the items. This is a more granular way of doing it. Like, okay, I think it was Ada who asked. Yes, Ada asked that, can we define the space? If we put space around or space between, can we define the space? Gap allows you to do that, okay? But I'm not going to go into it in this video because I want to touch items, okay? But you can read through, they have the visualization and you can read through and you can set that for yourself, okay? So we have finished the container part of it, all right? Let's now go to the children, the items, okay? Because I think it's important, okay? Now, I'm not going to go through order. Order is just a way to, like over here, it says flex items are laid out in source order. What that means is however they appear in your code, that's how they are going to appear. Let me show you. Like here, you see how I put 1 first, 2 first, 3 first, 4 first. That's why it's appearing 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. Okay, that's called source order. Okay, the order property allows you to define how they appear. There's a part of me I'm like, let me do it. Okay, I didn't plan to do this, but let me do it. Okay, because I am committed to your understanding. I want you to understand, or at least have the tools to understand. Okay, all right. So we are working on container 1. Let's get rid of aligned content. Okay, let's get rid of flex wrap, and I'm going to delete 789 just for simplicity. Okay, all right. Let's delete 6 as well. Okay, so just for simplicity. So the source order or the source code is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the order. Okay, now I need to give some classes. So let's give box 1 and let's give box 2 and let me just give them all box 3. I'm giving these classes so that I can target them. I want to target the individual boxes. Okay, now you would normally do this with IDs, but let me just use class. Okay, all right. So box 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so this is my container 1. So I want to change the order. I want the order to be 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. Okay, right now it's 1, 2, 3. It's following the code. It's following my code, but I want the order to be different. And so to do that, I will use that order. So I'm going to say container 1, box 1. Okay, and I'm going to repeat that 2 more times. Okay, and it's going to be box 3 and it's going to be box 5. Okay, now I'm now going to take this order, right? Default is 0. We start counting from 0. I'm going to apply this order property. Okay, so I want it to be 1. Okay, 1, I don't need to change 1 because 1 is already in the first position, but I want it to be 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. Okay, so I'm going to add order 2. Okay, default is 0. Okay. Oh, I made a mistake. Okay, I haven't worked with this I don't think I've ever worked with this in my life, to be honest, but I will do it for you. Okay, all right, default is 0, so I'm gonna have to add it to all of them. Okay, so I want box 1 to be first, so I'm going to give it an order. I can leave box 1 because it has an order of 0, which is first. Okay, but I want box 3 to be next, so I give it an order of 1. Okay, I know it looks weird because all the other boxes have 0, so that's why you see 3 has been shifted to the end because all the other boxes have 0, but let me set all of them. So I want 3 to be number 2, and then I want 5 to be the third. Okay, I want 5 to be the third. So I want 1, 3, 5, 2. So I want 2 to be the fourth. So I want 1, 3, 5. Oh, what did I say 4? No, this was wrong. Okay, I want this with 5. Okay, so I want 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. So 2. Okay, and then I want my box number 4 to be 4. Ha! Okay, I'm correct. Okay, so you can see the order property is not working on the container. It's working on the individual items. Okay, that's the first thing to note. It's working on the individual items. Okay, so what I have done is, even though in the code, the order is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the code. But in my CSS, I'm changing the order. by using the order property. So by default, order is 0. That's why I didn't have to apply it to box 1, because box 1, which I want to be first, already has order of 0. So it's going to be first. But I had to apply orders to all the other boxes. So the second box, because we count from 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I gave box 3 order 1, then I gave box 5 order 2, then I gave box 2 order 3, and then finally box 4 order 4. Okay? So now we now have it in the order we want, 1, 3, 5, 2, 4. Somebody might ask me, okay, Arit, why not just change it in the code? Why not just change it in the code? Well, is it possible that maybe I have a button? I'm not going to code it here because it will take time. But maybe I have a button, or I have a series of buttons where I can change the order of the boxes. So I want to be able to, when you click this button, the order of the boxes changes. If I change it in the HTML, it will change for everybody. But if I code it so that clicking the box applies a certain set of CSS, then I can have a different experience for different people. So whoever clicks or whoever checks the checkbox of order it odd numbers first, for example, then if they click odd numbers first, it will apply this set of CSS. If they click even numbers first, I would define another set of CSS where the even numbers are first. And so this allows me to keep my HTML standard, but have some variability that I can apply to my user's experience. Okay, so that's an application of, this order property. Okay, let's move on. Time is going. Okay, so that was order. Now flex grow. Okay, this is another interesting one. I don't use it all the time. It was another interesting one. So for flex grow, let's look at that. Okay, so let's get rid of this. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so flex grow, I'm going to get rid of 4 and 5 because I need some space. Okay, now for flex grow, it's a way of forcing an item to take up more space than the other items. Okay, so let's look at it. So flex grow says, this defines the ability for a flex item to grow if necessary. It accepts a unitless value that serves as a proportion. It dictates what amount of the available space inside the flex container the item should take up. Okay? All right, so let's look at it. We have our container 1 and we have box. Okay, so let's define that. Okay, so container 1, and we want to act on the box. Okay, now if I say flex grow 1, okay, so I added flex grow 1 to all the boxes in container 1. Okay, what that has done, it told us if all items have flex grow set to 1, the remaining space will be distributed equally to all children. So that's what we saw. Okay, without that flex grow, you can see our boxes, they are each equal size, but there's extra space to the right of them. Okay, but we want these elements to equally take up that space. We want them to grow to the size that they can all be on that line, but they are equally sized. Okay, so that is what flex grow 1 has done. It has taken up the extra space and given it to each child equally. Each child gets one tom-tom. I'm dating myself, tom-tom. So each child has one, right? So they are all equally sized to take up all the space. Okay, now let's look at what it says. It now says if one of the children has a value of 2, that child would take up twice as much of the space either one of the others, or it will try to. So let's see what that means. Okay, so instead of box that I apply to all of them, let's select box 2. Okay, so we say box 2. So that will give us our really is olive, even though it says box yellow, but it's our olive box, okay? So if our box 2, we give it a flex grow of 3, you see what happened? Okay, without it, our 3 boxes are the same size, and they are all, because we've not added any flex, direction, any align, justify content. We've not, so they are default on the top left corner of our container, all, together, and see all the space to the right of box 3, okay? But when we add flex grow 3, what has happened? Well, they've taken up all the space, but box 2 has 3 times as much space as box 1 or 3. Okay? I remember when I was young, sleeping in bed with my sisters, I had a sister that she sleep like this. So it's like the rest of us were like just clinging to the edge of the bed, That's kind of what's happening here, okay? The second child is taking up a lot more space than the first or the third, okay? Because of this flex grow 3. What that 3 is, give 3 times as much space to this element compared to the other elements in its row, okay? That's what it means, all right? Okay, so that's flex grow. And flex shrink, I'm not going to show this, is like the opposite of that, okay? It's an opposite. So flex shrink, let's see it. What does it matter? Okay, so flex shrink, okay. Our time is gone. Flex shrink, okay. So this is not going to work. The reason why it's not going to work is because there's more space on the row than the boxes are taking, okay? If it was a different setup where there wasn't enough space, right? And you added a flex shrink, what flex shrink will do is it will shrink whichever element you applied flex shrink to. It will shrink it to the point where there's now enough space for all the elements, and it will only shrink that one. It will not shrink the other ones, okay? It will not shrink the other ones, all right? That's what that is, okay? You can play with it. You can play with this, okay? And then flex basis. This is, again, I'm not going to go into it. The truth of the matter is a lot of FlexBox will work on the container. That's the truth, okay? It's not very common that we need to act on the individual items in the Flex container. Sometimes we do, but it's not always common, right? So that's why I spent a lot more time on the Flex container properties, okay? So we have flex basis, we have flex, which is shorthand for grow, shrink, and basis combined. I'm not going to go through that. I want to end with align self because I think this is important, okay? So align self allows you to override what Flex container has done, okay? And I use this, okay? So let's make this flex grow, okay? Let's make it grow just to make it interesting, okay? Now, for some reason, even though let me do it this way. Align items flex end. Okay, I want to do it opposite, okay? So I have my 3 items. One of them is bigger than the rest because I gave it a flex grow, but I want these 2 to be at the top, just the 2, not all of them, okay? Right now, all of them are at the bottom, but I want just the 2 to be at the top. So according to this, we can apply align self. And I like the name because it tells you it is aligning itself, just me, myself, and I, okay? Not us, me, okay? So I can apply align self and give it flex start, okay? So I need to grab, okay, so I already have the box here. I applied flex grow. Let's see now if this will work. I haven't tried it before, but let's say align, let me comment it out. Oh, no, sorry. Okay, so align self, and I want to give it flex start. Bam. Okay, you see what happened? Align items moved all of them to the end of the cross axis. Yes. Okay, Align items did that. It took all of them, moved it to the bottom, the end of the cross axis. But I only want that for 1 and 3. I want 2 to remain in its same position horizontally, but I still want it at the top. So I do that by applying align self to the second box. So that has overridden, it overrode what align item set. Okay. I know some of you might be asking, okay, but CSS, they taught us that whatever you define below takes precedence. Okay, let's see. Let me take this definition and let me put it at the top. Okay, it still works. Okay, because I know that may be a question. They say, oh, CSS, whatever you define at the bottom, is what takes precedence. Well, in this case, even though I have defined the align items after the align self takes precedence over align items. Doesn't matter what align items has set, align self will have the final say on that item that you apply it to. Okay. We are at the end of our session. We went over by a little bit. I hope this was helpful to everyone. Let me switch back to my face. Yes. So I hope this was helpful to everyone. Yes, I wanted to do this because I think some of us are visual learners, right? So I said, if I cover, I've not added anything, the guide is there, but I wanted to take that guide and show visually what it is teaching. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comments, you can ask in the Slack group, but that's it. I will see you all on Slack. Thank you for tuning in. All right.